I spent all my life in the music industry, being a performer and loving every moment of it. This passion will never go away.
Ready? 1, 2, 3. She might be in spasm.
Yeah.
Céline Dion's $570 million fortune is more than a number. It's a monument to decades of sacrifice, grief, and unshakable resilience. From a childhood spent in poverty to selling over 200 million records, her journey has been extraordinary. But behind every standing ovation lies a story her family knows too well, a lifetime of missed moments, private heartbreak, and a body pushed beyond its limits. How did the girl from Charlemagne build one of the greatest legacies in music? And why does its weight bring her family to tears? From a drawer to the world stage. Céline Marie Claudette Dion's story didn't begin with glamour, designer gowns, or even the comfort of a crib. It began in Charlemagne, Quebec, as the youngest of 14 children in a family where music was abundant but money was painfully scarce. Their home rang with laughter and song, but it also echoed with the sounds of struggle. Cupboards that were often bare, winters that crept into the walls, and a constant awareness that every small comfort came at a cost. Her first bed wasn't a bed at all. It was a drawer pulled from a wooden dresser, lined with blankets and placed on the floor. That drawer cradled the baby who would one day hold the world spellbound with her voice. In that cramped home, her lullabies were not sung directly to her. They drifted through the air from her older siblings rehearsing late at night. She would lie there listening to melodies before she could even understand the words, absorbing the rhythms and harmonies as naturally as other children learned to walk. Music became her first language, her first refuge. For the Dions, music wasn't a hobby. It was the thread that held them together through lean times. Her parents were musicians, often performing to scrape together enough to feed so many mouths. The house was full of love, but always short on everything else. By the age of 5, Céline's voice was already drawing attention. She sang at her brother's wedding, not as a novelty, but as someone whose gift was already undeniable. She didn't sing for applause. She sang like her life depended on it. And in many ways, it did. Singing wasn't a pastime, it was a lifeline. Every note she hit was another step away from the cold reality of poverty. A cassette tape changed her life at 12 years of age. She and her mother wrote songs together, and her brother, Michel, helped her record demos. One of the tapes was sent to a Montreal music producer named René Angélil. When he pressed play, he was moved to tears by her voice. It was not simply talent. Something pure, something raw, something never before heard. In an act of faith that would become the stuff of music history, René mortgaged his house to finance her first album. This was not a business decision, but an act of faith. The investment involved much more than money. It was very personal. He could see beyond the shy, ungainly girl with crooked teeth and the second-hand clothes. He saw an artist ready to transcend borders, language, and circumstance. But what no one realized back then was that René was not just investing in an album. He was investing in the rest of his life. Her ascent had occurred ever since and was only relentless. She was, for a long time, training like an athlete, practicing pronunciation, pitch, and breath control, all for hours. Other teenagers would be going and coming from swinging at dances and experimenting with freedom, while she spent that time in studios learning to sing in English, phoneticizing it before she could understand it. And perhaps the joys of youth not spent were worth it for perfecting the craft, missing birthdays, school events, and family moments, and gaining something as precious as the ability to make the world stop and listen to a single note. Céline Dion's journey, which began with hunger, the hunger not just for food but for a life beyond mere survival, from a dresser drawer in Charlemagne to stages halfway around the globe, was silently spearheaded by the man who stood beside her, guiding each step of her way, having risked everything to give her the chance. What neither of them could have predicted was that this partnership, born from a cassette tape, would grow into a love story that defied convention, weathered storms, and became the heartbeat of her entire world. A love story built for eternity. When Céline first met René Angélil, She was a shy 12-year-old with a voice far too big for her small frame. He was already a seasoned figure in the music industry, a man 26 years her senior who had weathered his own storms. Their bond began in the quiet space between music and belief. René wasn't just her manager, he became her shield, protecting her from the ruthless pressures of fame, the doubts of critics, and the loneliness that often comes with success. He was the steady breath behind every note she sang. For years, their connection remained one of mentorship and trust. But as Céline matured, so did the depth of their relationship. It didn't happen overnight. It grew slowly, quietly, the way roots strengthen beneath the surface before anyone notices the bloom. At 19, Céline poured her feelings into a handwritten letter to René, confessing the love she had kept locked away. By 20, that love had begun to blossom privately, away from the cameras, away from a world that might not understand. Their relationship was never built for tabloids. It wasn't driven by spectacle or attention. It was built on the small moments, whispered encouragement backstage, his quiet pride when she hit an impossible note, the way he would stand at the edge of the stage, not for the audience's view, but for hers. "He was the only man who made me feel safe enough to be completely myself," she would later say. Upon coming out with their relationship, they were slapped in the face with rumors, raised eyebrows, and speculations. Yet Céline stood firm. She knew what they had was real, and there was no way she was going to let the public write their truth. In December 1994, they were wed at Montreal's Notre Dame Basilica in a ceremony that seemed more to involve a sacred vow than a celebrity event. She wore a gown studded in crystal and a towering tiara, and beyond that, glitz, was a woman claiming a love she believed in with all her heart. Her marriage was a rarity in show business, not perfect but deeply faithful. They created a balance between the frenzy of world tours and award shows with domestic tranquility. Grammy nights were spent making breakfast together. International flights ended with evenings at home, talking, laughing, or just being there for one another. René was her manager, her mirror, her confidant, and the father of her children. He steadied the ground beneath her when the waters of fame began to rock her with the weight of its tide, side by side, for all of these 2 decades now, to face the scene highs and lows in life. And every time Céline stepped on a stage to sing about love, she just did not sing the lyrics. She also testified. She testified to patience, perseverance, and a relationship that had weathered every kind of storm without breaking. But not even the most enduring love can escape the cruelty of life. Hence, this year, in 2013, that steady presence, the unshakable partner, was diagnosed, an affliction that would mark the dawn of a slow unraveling of the life they had spent building together. An affliction that would force Céline into a type of heartbreak that no standing ovation could soften. What followed was a chapter of loss so profound it arrived not in waves, but in crushing blows. And it began with the man who had once risked everything to believe in her. When grief arrived in twos. In January 2016, Céline Dion's world cracked wide open. The man who had been at her side since the moment she first dreamed of singing, her manager, her husband, her anchor, was slipping away. René Angélil had been battling throat cancer for years, and while Céline had remained hopeful, the disease was relentless. She put her career on hold, canceling performances and tours, not for rest, but to be by his side in the quiet halls of hospitals and the stillness of their home. There were no glamorous stages, no glittering gowns in those final days. There was only a chair pulled up beside a hospital bed, her hand clasped around his, and the silent rhythm of machines marking the passing of time. She had spent decades leaning on his strength. Now she became his. Every word she spoke, every song she softly hummed was an act of love, an attempt to ease the pain and fear that loomed over them both. On January 14, 2016, the silence won. René's breath, the same breath that had once cheered her from backstage, that had whispered encouragement before every performance, was gone. Just like that, the man who had believed in her before the world even knew her name was no longer there to catch her when she stumbled. The woman who had stood unshaken before billions now faced a wound no audience could see, and no spotlight could heal. She didn't collapse for the cameras. Her grief was too sacred for headlines. But those close to her spoke of an emptiness in her eyes, of a weight that seemed impossible to carry. Days later, she walked into Montreal's Notre Dame Basilica, the same place where they had promised each other forever. Only this time, she walked alone. The aisle stretched out like a lifetime, the pews filled with faces blurred by tears, and the stained glass windows above seemed dimmer than they had on her wedding day. However, the universe still tortured her. 2 days after she buried her husband, her brother, Daniel, also died from cancer. It was cruel, almost beyond imagining. The one with whom she had shared her childhood songs and the trials of early life. Within 48-hour spans, she lost both the love of her life and a piece of her past. Grief didn't come in stages. It came, as it so often does, in floods. 2 funerals, back to back. 2 eulogies recited in the same cracked voice. She lit candles for both men, trembling hands holding memories of long-dead love and history. There was no room to breathe, segueing loss into loss. No time to heal before the next goodbye. She would sit in silence, gripping the photographs until her knuckles turned white, her lips moving as if to speak to them, but no sound came out. Those who loved her said the music inside her seemed to play through glass in those days, there but muffled, far away and fragile. Yet she did what she always did, rose up and bore her grief like a hidden instrument, one she played solely for herself. For her, going back on stage was not to perform, but to pay homage to the men she had lost. A woman shaped by melody, strengthened by mourning. But while she was mourning the losses she could see, an invisible enemy was already taking shape inside her body, one that would threaten not just her voice but her very ability to stand. The fight within. For decades, Céline Dion seemed unshakable. She could stand before tens of thousands, deliver a note so pure it stopped time, and make it look effortless. But behind the curtain, another story was unfolding. One she kept hidden even from her most devoted fans. It began quietly. In the mid-2000s, she started noticing small changes. Her breath didn't come as easily as it once had. Her muscles felt tense in ways she couldn't explain. At first, she brushed it off as exhaustion, the natural wear from decades of performing. On stage, she dazzled, but backstage she fought through mysterious stiffness and spasms that seemed to grow worse with time. For years, she hid it. She told the public it was fatigue, colds, or simple overwork. But the truth was more unsettling. The spasms sometimes gripped her so tightly she could barely walk. Her muscles would lock without warning. Even breathing could feel like a battle. And yet, night after night, she pushed through, smiling under the lights while her body begged for rest. In desperation, she turned to medication, not to calm nerves, but to keep moving. At one point, she was taking doses of Valium so high they could have been deadly. "I could have died," she later admitted, her voice heavy with the realization. But for her, the alternative, giving up the stage, felt unthinkable. Small changes started happening to her performances. When she lost her voice during songs, she would hold the mic towards the audience and let them sing the rest. Fans thought it was fun. In reality, she needed her body to recuperate for a few seconds. However, in the end, she could no longer hide the truth. In December 2022, she shared with the world regarding the condition that has been silently part of her life: the stiff person syndrome. It is a rare, progressive neurological disorder that has hitherto not caused much of a disturbance, with extremely painful spasms and the loss of mobility. For someone for whom breath control, movement, and voice accuracy were the source of livelihood, it was tragic. The world saw her vulnerability for the first time in her documentary, I Am, Céline Dion. One scene in particular became unforgettable. She lay on a therapy table, her body jerking involuntarily as her therapist gently told her to squeeze his hand if the pain was too much. She squeezed again and again, her face twisting as the spasms overtook her. There was no music, no spotlight, just the raw reality of a woman fighting to hold on to the life she had built. And yet, even in the face of this cruel illness, her spirit remained intact. She continued her therapy, hours of physical exercises, breathing work, nutritional changes, not in the hope of reclaiming her old life, but in determination to keep living the one she still had. "If it cracks, then it cracks," she said of her voice. "But if it works, it will be the happiest day of my life." Her words weren't about perfection anymore. They were about perseverance. Céline was no longer chasing flawless performances or sold-out arenas. But even as her body betrayed her, Céline's greatest fight wasn't for herself. It was for the 3 sons she had promised to protect no matter the cost. A fortune forged in sacrifice. Céline Dion's career has earned her one of the largest fortunes in music history, an estimated $570 million. But every dollar in that empire carries a story, a sold-out tour that required her to perform through migraines and exhaustion, a Las Vegas residency that redefined modern entertainment but kept her away from home for months at a time, endorsements, albums, perfume lines, and real estate ventures that grew her wealth, all built on decades of discipline and a refusal to quit even when grief and illness pressed hard against her. To outsiders, it's a staggering sum, the kind of wealth that seems untouchable. But to Céline and her family, that fortune is not a trophy. It's a monument to what she gave up. It represents birthdays missed, sleep traded for rehearsals, and a lifetime of being on for the world, even when she felt broken inside. For her children, it's a legacy that comes wrapped in both pride and sorrow. They know it was earned note by note, through nights when she sang to millions while carrying pain only she could feel. Today, much of her real estate empire has been sold or carefully managed into long-term trusts. The sprawling $72 million Bahamian-inspired estate in Florida, the $25.5 million chateau in Quebec, and other high-profile properties have either found new owners or been placed into careful planning. She keeps her Las Vegas home, valued at $4.5 million, as a place of both healing and family life. Its walls no longer echo with the chaos of tour prep, but with quieter sounds. Her boys' laughter, the hum of a piano, the soft notes she still sings in the mornings. Today, her 3 sons are at the center of her life. René Charles, her eldest, who is now 24, has started leaving his mark in music under the name R.C. Angelil. The twins, Nelson and Eddie, 14 years old, continue to be kept from the public eye, growing up in an environment where their mother has fought hard to provide them with privacy, stability, and love. In their upbringing, she took a hands-on approach alongside providing education, nurturing their emotional well-being, and exposing them to creative activities. She passed down not only her love of music but also her discipline, sense of humility, and purpose. Close ones say that although she never sings on stage nowadays, she sings every day. For herself, for the kids, and to the walls of her house. Sometimes it's a sweet lullaby before bedtime. Sometimes it's a little out-of-tune hum during cooking. No one is listening and there is no applause. It's her opportunity to connect, to remind her children, and in part herself, that music is not just a job. Music is her life. There is currently no word from her on the existence of a will, but sources have reported that estate planning is quietly making its way, not out of fear, but out of clarity. A mother ensuring her children will be protected and cared for long after she is no longer able to guide them herself. For Céline, this is the most authentic purpose of her riches, giving her sons the safety and independence she never knew as a child sleeping in a dresser drawer. Céline Dion's voice may no longer fill arenas, but her life song echoes in every soul she's touched. If her music has ever walked you through heartbreak or lifted you in joy, share your story in the comments and keep her melody alive. Like, subscribe, And watch our next deep dive to explore the untold stories behind the world's most beloved icons.